I'm Claire Anderson. Airport security stopped me right at the gate with a one-way ticket to Paris in my hand, the trip I had dreamed of my entire childhood. They told me I had been reported missing that morning, flagged as mentally unstable and unfit to travel. The person who filed the report? My own sister. My passport had been deactivated. The entire plan seemed to collapse in an instant. But I just smiled, pulled a USB drive from my bag. Inside it was everything. Hidden camera footage, supporting documents, and an unintentional confession from the one who tried to take me down. Have you ever been treated like the outsider in your own family, and the moment you stood up for yourself they called you a traitor? If you've ever been dismissed simply for dreaming bigger, leave a comment. Hit like, subscribe to the channel and stay with me. The story I'm about to tell isn't just about a flight, it's about a life that was stolen, and how I took it back. Ever since I was little, I was used to being placed behind Avery in everything. When she turned 6, our mom made me give up the only large bedroom upstairs because Avery needs space to explore her artistic talent. I was 9 at the time, doing well in school, never caused trouble, always cleaned up after myself. And yet I was moved into the tiny dark room next to the laundry closet just so my sister could hang her paintings. Mom said, "Claire, you're the older sister. You have to make sacrifices. She's still young, you can't be selfish." Dad didn't say anything. He just sighed and carried my suitcase down the stairs. I remember sitting by the window in that new room for hours, staring out at the backyard, wondering what I had done wrong to deserve being pushed aside like that. From then on, every holiday, every birthday, every family outing revolved around Avery. Every summer she was sent off to an art camp in Vermont. I stayed home and worked at the public library to save up for books. Her birthdays were glowing events with 3-tier cakes, fresh flowers, and a hired band. A supermarket cake and a quiet reminder: we're saving for Avery's travel program. When I was 17, something happened I will never forget. Mom threw a big 15th birthday party for Avery at our house. Over 30 guests came, friends, teachers, even her ballet instructor. I was in charge of setting up snacks, clearing the tables, and keeping the cake cold. But when it was time to bring it out, I opened the box and froze. The entire top layer of frosting had been ruined, soaked with red wine, smeared like dried blood. Guests started whispering. Avery burst into tears. Mom looked right at me. "Claire, what have you done?" Before I could respond, Avery pointed at me, eyes red. "She always hated me. She's jealous." My throat tightened. I hadn't touched the cake. Minutes later, hiding in the kitchen trying not to cry, I saw a wine glass by the sink, Avery's, with her lipstick stain still on the rim. I quietly wiped the counter. I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't have proof, but because I knew no one would believe me. Dad was the only one who gave me any kind of fairness. But his silence only made me feel more isolated. He didn't speak up for me. He didn't challenge Mom. But sometimes I'd find a few bills tucked inside my textbook or an envelope with $50 and a note: "For your SAT fee." I never asked, never thanked him out loud, but I understood. This was his quiet way of telling me he saw me. But his glance was never strong enough to drown out Mom's voice. She controlled everything: our finances, our school plans, our social calendars, even parent-teacher meetings. I once won first prize in a state essay competition. The school invited me to speak at the honor ceremony. Mom didn't go. That evening she had Avery's theater showcase. When I came home holding my certificate, she just nodded and said, "That's fine. But don't let your math grades slip." Avery was different. Every messy drawing she made went straight to the fridge. Mom would photograph it and post it on Facebook with the caption, "Our future artist." Avery once played tree number 3 in a spring recital. Mom still bought her flowers and hired a videographer like she was the lead. I learned to live without praise. I applied for scholarships by myself. I filled out college applications late into the night when the house was asleep. I worked extra shifts at the library, sometimes tutoring neighborhood kids in French to save up for a second-hand laptop. Meanwhile, Avery only needed to ask. Once she told Mom she needed a new iPad to make digital art, and Mom immediately nodded, saying, "She needs it to grow her talent." If I needed something, I had to justify it. When I asked for money to pay an application fee for a scholarship, Mom said, "Claire, don't chase dreams that are too far out of reach. Be realistic. Not everyone gets to study abroad." I didn't argue. I just turned away and kept writing my essay, on my phone because my laptop's keyboard was broken. There were nights I lay in that old room next to the washer, hearing Avery laugh with her friends upstairs. She'd throw loud sleepovers, crank music past midnight, and I'd just put on my headphones, close my eyes, and imagine a life where I wasn't compared, judged, or reduced to someone else's shadow. I didn't hate Avery. I used to love her deeply. But over time, that love eroded under the weight of the unfairness she benefited from. She knew it too, but never once stopped. And Mom, the one who should have taught us both about compassion and equality, was the one who nurtured that favoritism like a virtue. I was the older daughter, the one always told to understand, to sacrifice, to be practical. But the more I was pushed down, the more I quietly prepared for the day I would leave that house for good. And that day came under the sterile lights of the international terminal. I stood there not as a child needing permission, but as someone who was ready to leave, no matter who tried to stop me. I had written over 30 essays in 6 months, applying to every scholarship, summer program, and international opportunity one could find. Most never replied. Some sent polite rejections. So I kept going. I wrote through the nights, eyes burning, headphones blocking out Avery's laughter from upstairs. Then one afternoon in February, my inbox lit up with a quiet but life-changing subject line. Congratulations, Global Future Leaders Program. I read it 3 times before I let myself believe it. A full-ride 2-year scholarship to Paris, covering living costs, airfare, housing, and even an internship at the regional United Nations office in Europe. I didn't scream. I didn't run through the house like a movie character. I just sat still, arms wrapped around myself, trembling. Partly from joy but mostly from fear. Fear that, like every other moment of victory in my life, this one would be stolen too. I printed the acceptance letter, slid it into an envelope, and hid it under old clothes in the back of my closet. For a week I didn't tell anyone, not even Dad. The only person I confided in was Wyatt. Wyatt had been my one steady friend since middle school. He was always nearby, especially when others turned their backs on me for being too bookish. We didn't call each other best friends or make big promises. But there was a quiet understanding between us. We could read each other without needing words. That night I asked him to meet me at the town park. The February wind cut through our coats. I handed him the letter. Wyatt read it and looked up, eyes shining. "You did it," he whispered. I nodded, lips barely moving. "I'm not sure I'm going," I said quietly. "You know what they'll do when they find out." Wyatt was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and started taking notes. "Then we need a backup plan." I stared at him. "You really think they'll go that far? Claire, they changed your therapy appointment just to cover up the fact that Avery pushed you down the stairs. I don't trust them, not for a second." And just like that, Plan B was born. We started by applying for a replacement passport. I reported the old one as lost during a trip to Colorado the previous year. Wyatt drove me to the passport office, posing as my older cousin. I submitted the forms, took the photos, handed in the documents. A month later, the new passport arrived at the post office. Wyatt picked it up and hid it at his place. Next came the scholarship documents. I scanned every letter: acceptance, visa confirmation, program itinerary, and a recommendation from MS. Parker, my former homeroom teacher and the only person who ever told me, "You don't have to become someone else to be worth something." We stored everything 3 ways: paper copies, a PDF on a hard drive, and an encrypted folder on a USB hidden at the bottom of my jewelry box. That USB held something even more important: secret footage of Avery. I had installed a tiny hidden camera in my room, tucked beneath the bookshelf, since last fall after losing a half-finished essay. I'd been scolded for being irresponsible enough to misplace an assignment, but I remembered clearly, I'd printed it and left it on my desk. A week later, I found out Avery had taken paper from my room to sketch with, and my essay had been used as background for one of her drawings. That was when doubt left me completely. I didn't confront her. I simply started gathering proof. In the most recent video just a few days ago, Avery entered my room a little after 10 p.m. She opened my bag, rummaged through my wallet, pulled out my passport and examined it closely. She smiled, then slipped it back inside, but not in the right place. I didn't say a word. I just saved the clip to my USB drive, labeled the file "urgent," and hid it in the secret lining of the winter coat I planned to take with me to Paris. Finally, I sent a private email to Mr. Hall, the scholarship program coordinator. I didn't go into detail, just wrote a single line. I'm experiencing some family issues, but all required documents are valid and complete. If anything unusual happens, please contact this number. I attached a scan of my backup passport, medical clearance, and a signed affidavit from a law office Wyatt had a connection with. Hall didn't reply right away. But 2 days later he sent back one sentence. We understand. You are not alone. I read that line over and over. Not alone. For the first time in years I felt like someone was genuinely standing on my side. Not because of status, not because of appearances, but because of the truth. We reviewed our plan one final time, 3 weeks before the flight. Wyatt mapped out a full escape route in case I was detained at the airport. He prepped a second car, a backup phone, an international SIM card, photocopies of all my documents, and even a timed email that would auto-send to the press if I went missing within 24 hours. When I asked him if this was all a bit much, Wyatt just looked at me. Claire, they don't just want to keep you from going. They want to prove you never deserved to go. I didn't answer. I just tightened the straps of my backpack. In the corner of my closet, beneath the pile of thick winter clothes, my new passport sat untouched. But I knew sooner or later I'd need it. And when that day came, I wouldn't tremble, wouldn't ask for permission, wouldn't wait to be allowed. I would go. No matter what it took. I announced the scholarship over dinner, one evening in late April. No fancy speech, no build-up. I just looked up, set my fork down, and said clearly, I'll be going to Paris in June. I received a full-ride scholarship for 2 years, including an internship at the United Nations. The fork in Mom's hand froze midair. Dad looked up but said nothing. Avery was the first to react. She let her hands drop, her eyes wide like I'd just confessed to something criminal. Paris. Mom repeated slowly as if each syllable sliced through her. You're saying a scholarship? In France. I nodded, keeping my gaze steady. Yes. Full ride. Tuition, housing, living expenses, airfare. I've already made all the preparations. Avery bit her lip, then suddenly burst into tears. The sobs came so quickly I didn't know if they were real. Mom, she's not stable. I've heard her say she wants to run away. She used to lock herself in her room all day, not eat or drink. She's not okay. I glared at her, my heart pounding. Mom turned to me, her voice taut. Claire, this is serious. You think you can make a decision like this on your own? Without consulting your family? Without praying for the Lord's guidance? Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, I have prayed. And I don't believe God wants me trapped in fear. Dad still said nothing. He went back to eating like if he kept quiet long enough, the whole thing might disappear. The next morning, Mom invited Pastor Mark to the house. She called it a special prayer session to heal Claire's spirit. I thought it would just be a private talk in the living room, but when I came downstairs I saw neighbors, a few people from church, even some of Avery's old classmates filling every chair and lining the hallway. I froze on the staircase. Avery sat in the middle of the room, eyes red and swollen, clutching a Bible. Mom walked over and took my hand. Come sit with us. We're going to pray the darkness out of your mind. Pastor Mark started with a sermon about young souls seduced by the material world, about how the devil often disguises temptation as opportunity, pulling the weak away from faith and family. Every eye turned toward me. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just sat quietly, letting them pray aloud, asking for my deliverance, for me to see the light, to return to the path of righteousness. Afterward, Mom handed me a folder. Her tone was light, almost cheerful. This is the official declination form. All you have to do is sign. We'll send it in with a note that you're withdrawing due to mental health concerns. I opened it and saw the line pre-written, decline of offer due to mental health instability. I looked up at her. Who wrote this? Lucy from church helped me. She's done social work. She knows the professional terms. This way the school won't judge you harshly. I don't have mental health issues. Claire, don't be stubborn. This is the safest way. The world isn't how you think it is. Paris, alone. You've never handled money or travel. You don't know anyone there. Who do you think you are? I didn't respond. I closed the folder, took it upstairs. That night, I opened my email and sent the entire file to Wyatt. I photographed every page and forwarded copies to Mr. Hull. I added a single line. My family is trying to force me to decline. But I'm not giving up. The next morning I played the part, quiet, pale, sluggish at breakfast. Mom looked relieved. Avery peeked up from her phone then back down. Have you thought things through? Mom asked gently. I nodded. Yes. I'll sign. Mom exhaled, smiling. Good. I knew you'd understand. I took the folder out to the backyard. Instead of signing, I wrote a single sentence across the front page. I'm not declining the scholarship. I'm preparing to leave safely. I placed the folder back exactly where it was. Mom wouldn't check. She was too sure I'd caved. That night, I received an email from Mr. Hall. All documents received. Any irregularities will be logged. We will protect you. I closed my laptop and pulled the curtains shut. Outside, Avery stood by Mom's car laughing with a few friends. She glanced up at me through the window, eyes full of challenge. I smiled faintly. This battle wasn't over. But now I held the upper hand. I left the house early on a Wednesday morning. The sun hadn't risen. Mist draped over the yard like a sheer veil across the trees and grass. Wyatt parked a few houses down wearing a gray delivery jacket and a cap pulled low. I wore old jeans, a loose hoodie, my hair tucked under a knit hat. To anyone else, I was just a kid helping deliver church supplies. The wooden gate in the backyard creaked softly as I slipped through. I glanced back at my bedroom window, curtains still drawn. The house was asleep. In my backpack were the new passport, a plain ticket under the name C. James, printed scholarship documents, Mr. Hall's verification letter, and the USB drive wrapped in a padded pouch. I brought no keepsakes. No letters. No family photos. I wanted no hesitation. You could? Wyatt asked as I climbed in. I nodded. Just need to get out. Then I'll be fine. We didn't talk much on the drive. Wyatt played soft acoustic guitar on the radio. I stared out the window as trees blurred past. Every mile that passed felt like another chain snapping free in my mind. At the airport, I got out at the side entrance to avoid the main security cameras. Wyatt handed me a paper bag disguised as a delivery. It held my disguised backpack inside. I walked into the terminal, blending in with the travelers. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. But I didn't let myself shake. I'd been preparing for this moment for months. The check-in counter was quiet. The staff member checked my name. James, against the ticket and passport. I kept my gaze calm, showing no sign of rush or anxiety. She nodded, printed my boarding pass, and tagged my luggage like everything was completely normal. I exhaled as I passed through the security checkpoint. Everything seemed smooth until I reached the gate waiting area. That's when two security officers approached. Are you Claire Anderson? The man asked, firm but not aggressive. I looked directly at them. I'm C. James. We need you to come with us to verify some information. A missing person report was just filed by your family. There are signs of mismatched documents. They escorted me to a small room behind the security zone. Cold metal chairs, blank white walls, a camera mounted in the corner. A female officer sat across from me and placed a copy of an old passport on the table. My previous one with a photo I'd submitted at 17. Next to it was a missing person report, signed by Lisa Anderson, stating, daughter shows signs of disorientation, carrying forged documents, potential risk of self-harm. I gave a faint smile. Not because it hurt, but because it was familiar. Far too familiar. How my mom always disguised control as concern. And how easily I was labeled a problem, just for daring to choose a different path. I'm guessing my mom didn't include any proof, I said. But I did. I reached into my backpack, pulled out the USB sealed in a metal case and placed it on the table. This contains video footage of my sister, Avery Anderson, entering my room without permission, going through my belongings and joking on TikTok that I won't be going anywhere. Her exact words were, my sister's not flying anywhere, trust me. Also included are copies of my scholarship documents, a valid plane ticket, and a confirmation email from the International Scholarship Organization. The officer glanced at her colleague. The man nodded and plugged the USB into a laptop. They watched the first video, Avery sitting in my room flipping through my passport and smirking. In the second, she was in front of a mirror recording on her phone, 3 days until my sister flies out, or not. I've got something planned. Her tone was unmistakably mocking. Another clip showed Avery stuffing papers back into my bag, then looking at the camera and whispering, "Mom says after this she'll understand she needs to stay put." I didn't say another word. I didn't have to. The truth spoke for itself. A little while later, they asked me to wait outside while they contacted the scholarship organization. I watched as Mr. Hall picked up on speakerphone. His voice was calm and steady. "We confirm. Claire Anderson is an accepted participant. All documents are valid and submitted on time. We're aware of her family situation and are providing support in accordance with international protocols." When I was allowed to leave the holding room, the female officer gently touched my shoulder. "You're brave. Go far and don't look back." I nodded, thanked her, and walked toward the gate. My heart still pounded, but it wasn't fear. It was because freedom was now just a few steps away. As I exited the screening area, a staff member returned my passport and boarding pass with a quiet nod. Everything was cleared within 10 minutes of Mr. Hall's call. He didn't just verify my identity and paperwork. He also asked the airport to log the incident according to legal procedures. "We're aware that Claire's family is intentionally trying to interfere through dishonest means," he stated firmly. "Our legal representative will be in contact if necessary." Before heading to the gate, I had to sign a short statement. Airport police, this time with a much different tone, asked me about my mother's and sister's actions. I recounted the events: my passport being tampered with, the missing person report, and the video evidence. They documented everything carefully and said they would coordinate with local authorities to summon the involved parties within 48 hours. I signed my name, my hand no longer shaking. After everything, for the first time, I felt the law was on my side. I wasn't just silently enduring anymore. Right before boarding, I glanced at my phone before switching to airplane mode. A message from Wyatt lit up the screen. "Heads up, reporters are catching on. Your old school confirmed your scholarship. Someone from the local paper is asking questions about your sister and mom." I wasn't surprised. In a small town like where I grew up, family scandals never stay buried for long. Things were exploding in ways I couldn't, and no longer wanted to, control. The plane lifted off just before 8 a.m., leaving behind the gray skies over Los Angeles and slicing through a veil of thin mist. I sat by the window watching the city grow smaller beneath the wing, feeling a weight lift from my chest until it was almost hollow. 11 hours later, when I landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport, I turned my phone back on. The messages poured in. Not from my mom. Not from Avery. But from people I never expected. Old classmates, high school teachers, a neighbor who once let me stay over during a family blow-up. The first headline I read came from a local news site. "Westwood student escapes guardianship abuse, secures full scholarship to Paris." Below it was a photo of me at a state awards ceremony 2 years ago, followed by the subheading, "Family denied eldest daughter's talent, favored the youngest. Community demands answers." The article included a statement from my former high school. Claire Anderson was a 4-year honor student, state-level speech champion, and mentor in our student support program. For unknown reasons, her application files were not forwarded by her family to the intended universities. The line that stopped me cold was at the end. The journalist had obtained an email from a prestigious university I once applied to. The admissions officer wrote, "We received an email from the parent, Mrs. Lisa Anderson, advising us against admitting Claire, citing her lack of social adjustment and tendency to cause disruptions. Instead, she recommended her younger daughter, Avery Anderson." I froze. Fingers still resting on my phone screen. My heart skipped a beat. It was no longer speculation. No longer a feeling. All the doubt I had silenced over the years, wondering if I was too sensitive, now stood in black and white. They really did it. They hadn't just abandoned me at home. They had actively blocked every exit I tried to take out into the world. Another message from Wyatt appeared. Audio recording just surfaced. "Your mom called the state rep's office saying you had a history of mental instability. Media's asking for confirmation." Suddenly, I realized I hadn't just escaped a home. I had climbed out of a pit so deep I hadn't even seen the top. All this time I thought I was just overlooked. Turns out I wasn't forgotten. I was deliberately erased. I looked out at the vast airport, people flowing in from every corner of the globe, each carrying their own story. carried mine too. But I wasn't hiding. I stepped into the light, no matter who was watching. And I knew from this moment on, no one would get to rewrite my story but me. Paris in early June carried a gentle sun and soft breeze slipping through the windows. I stepped out of the taxi in front of a stone building wrapped in ivy. A brass plaque on the wall read in French, Résidence Internationale pour étudiants. Inside were cool tiled hallways, high ceilings, and soft yellow light spilling from vintage chandeliers. The dorm manager led me to my room on the third floor, a small but bright space with a window facing an inner courtyard framed by trees and benches. My suitcase sat neatly by the bed, but I didn't open it right away. I stood quietly by the window for a long time, my hand resting on the weathered wood frame, feeling the breath of a city that was entirely foreign, and yet felt oddly like home. I had made it. No more locked bedroom doors. No more whispered suspicion. No more careful eyes every time I entered a room. The first few days passed like a dream. My first class was held in a mosaic-tiled lecture hall, taught by a Canadian professor, filled with students from over 20 countries. I met Lucia from Italy, Adam from Kenya, and Amina from Lebanon. Each had their own story. Some escaped war, others were the first in their family to attend college. When I said I came from New York, they just smiled and said, "You're lucky. America is the land of freedom." I didn't answer. I smiled faintly as if agreeing. But deep inside I knew freedom isn't something given. Not to people like me. Freedom is something you fight for step by step until you finally break through the box others built around you. 1 week after arriving, Mr. Hall emailed to inform me that I was nominated to participate in the Global Youth Conference for Social Justice at the UNESCO headquarters. This year's theme was family and the right to grow up free, a topic that nearly made me drop my pen the second time I read it. I wasn't the keynote speaker. But because my submitted essay on the relationship between cultural prejudice and family control was highly praised, the organizers invited me to give the opening remarks for the main discussion. The night I received the invitation, I sat alone in the small basement library of the dormitory, warm yellow light spilling onto a blank page. I held my pen but couldn't write a single word. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I had too much I wanted to say. Lucia came in, saw me sitting silently, and approached. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "Have you ever had to stand in front of hundreds of people and speak about what hurts you the most?" I replied without looking up. Lucia thought for a moment. "Yes. About war. And how it split my family apart." I looked up. "So how did you get through it?" She gave a sad smile. "I didn't get through it. I just told the truth. I didn't need anyone to sympathize. I just needed to stop hiding." That night, I wrote my speech not with logic, but with every memory I had tried to bury. I wrote about the room next to the laundry, about dinner with a supermarket cake, about the scholarship letter Mom tried to hide. I wrote without naming anyone, without pointing fingers, without mentioning blood ties. I only spoke about the feeling of being treated like a stranger in my own home. The conference was held in a large hall with vaulted glass ceilings and flags from over 100 countries hanging on both sides. I wore a dark blue dress. The color Mom once said made me look too heavy whenever I wore it. Hall shook my hand before I went on stage, his eyes seeming to say, "Just be yourself." Standing before the microphone, I looked down at the hundreds of faces waiting. I didn't see Mom. I didn't see Avery. But I knew they were watching. Somewhere in America, in a silent living room with a live stream on the screen. And I began. I grew up in a family with high fences and bright windows. People looked in and saw happiness, saw standards, saw morality. But some houses don't offer freedom through open doors. They offer it by deciding who is allowed to step outside. I didn't stop. I spoke of forced choices, silenced voices, the yearning to be recognized not for perfection but for honesty. I spoke of the fear of being labeled unstable, just because I refused to live the life others had chosen for me. I said, the right to grow up free doesn't depend on where you live, but on being allowed to make mistakes, to be different and to go far, whether others understand it or not. When I finished, the room was silent for a few seconds. Then applause filled the space, not too loud but steady and sincere. I didn't cry. I just bowed my head slightly, then stepped back from the stage, my heart pounding as if I had just thrown open a door locked shut for a lifetime. Lucia was the first to hug me backstage. "Wonderful," she said. "No names. No faces. But everyone knows what you're talking about. I nodded. I didn't need to expose anyone. The truth had its own voice. And that day I let it speak. I didn't expect the speech to spread so fast. Returning to the dorm, I only meant to check my schedule, but my inbox was already flooded with interview invitations, thank you notes, and messages from strangers everywhere. Within 3 days, the official video of my speech had surpassed 2 million views on the international conference platform. US media started reporting. CNN invited me for a recording. NPR wanted me on their morning show about youth and family. I did my first interview over Zoom, sitting in a corner of the campus overlooking a lavender garden, the stone building behind covered in moss. The host, a middle-aged woman with a warm yet sharp voice, asked if I realized the impact of my speech. I just said what I'd been too quiet about for too long, I answered. I didn't think it was special. Just honest. She nodded slowly through the screen. Honesty is always the strongest power. When the interview aired, I started receiving messages from people I'd gone to school with in Westwood. Some apologized for staying silent. Others admitted they'd thought I was cold and distant but now realized the truth. The whole town seemed awakened by a story they couldn't ignore. I also knew what was happening back home through snippets and scattered messages Wyatt sent. Avery had posted a TikTok video just days after the conference. In it, she sat in my room, the one that used to be mine, soft light, red-rimmed eyes. I was wrong. I'm jealous of Claire. I did unforgivable things. I just wanted to be loved. Please don't attack my family anymore, she said, her voice breaking at the end. The clip hit nearly 1 million views in 2 days, but the comments weren't what she hoped. One person wrote, "What about the video where you secretly recorded TikTok mocking your sister?" Another said, "Crying because you got caught isn't remorse." Some dug up Avery's old videos where she mocked nerds who only live with laptops. One account pointed out she'd deleted comments asking about her sister on her personal posts. Initial sympathy quickly turned into a storm of criticism. My mom didn't post a video but wrote a long Facebook post. "Our family has always valued all of Claire's achievements," she wrote. "We never blocked her dreams. There were misunderstandings, but parental love is constant." The post was immediately met with backlash. My former high school teacher, Ms. Madsen, reshared it with a comment, "I remember clearly who didn't attend the honor ceremony that year." A parent from Avery's school posted a screenshot of an email my mom sent to a university. "Claire is not competitive. We want the youngest to be considered first." The lies that had seemed buried deep in private inboxes began surfacing publicly. Some pieced together my speeches with old posts from my mom and Avery, titling it, "When Truth is Suppressed by Family." I watched it all in silence. No replies. No shares. No comments. One night, Lucia asked me while we sat on the dorm balcony, "Do you feel satisfied?" I swirled my tea, watching yellow light fall from the window opposite. "No. I just feel lighter. Like I don't have to scream anymore because finally, they've started to listen." On my phone, another message from Wyatt popped up. "Your mom just took down her Facebook. People at church are starting to question. Some say she should take a break from the parish council." Avery deleted all her social accounts. Silence since this morning. I read it and set my phone down. The feeling in my chest wasn't triumph. It was a thin thread of sadness, woven between freedom and the price paid for it. But I knew I couldn't undo what was lost. I could only move forward. The next day, in a social media and public policy class, the professor used my speech as an example during a discussion on personal influence on public perception. Students across the room watched the clip of me standing at the podium, eyes locked on the camera, voice low but every word carving into years of silence. I received a letter from Avery on a light rainy afternoon while reading in the small garden behind the dorm. The program manager delivered the envelope personally, saying someone in the US had sent it to the scholarship organization's official address, requesting it be hand-delivered. On the corner of the letter was a neat blue ink inscription, "For Claire, please read even if just once." I didn't open it right away. I held it in my lap all afternoon, occasionally running my fingers over the edge as if searching for something familiar but no longer whole. I didn't know what I was hoping for, an apology? An excuse? A late confession? By evening, When the street lights were on in the courtyard and the laughter from the communal dinner gradually quieted, I carefully opened the letter. Avery's handwriting was no longer the confident, flowing script it used to be but seemed hurried and hesitant. She wrote that after my speech she was suspended from the youth group at church, friends began distancing themselves, and her social media was now full of angry messages. She said she didn't blame me, that she should have known I would rise above. But she also wrote, "I just didn't expect you to do it without ever looking back." She shared that Mom had kept her locked in her room for days, while Dad silently worked in the backyard without saying a word. She wrote that since she was little she always felt pressured to be worthy of love. That Mom placed expectations on her because I was too independent. That she felt inferior to me in people's eyes, not because she wasn't capable, but because I never needed anyone's approval. The letter ended with a request: "If you agree, I want to meet. Just once. No blame. Just to look you in the eyes and say I understand." I set the letter down, feeling emptiness in my chest. Not from emotion nor anger, but because I wasn't sure if what I had just read was real or just another form of fear of losing control, when the world no longer revolved around her as before. Called Mr. Hall to ask if the organization would allow a family meeting if there was an official request. He replied that they did not forbid it but wanted to ensure my emotional and mental safety. "We will arrange a neutral space. But only if you truly want it," he said. 3 days later, I entered a small cafe in the old district near the Seine River. The back room was reserved by Mr. Hall, soft lighting, a round wooden table and 2 ash-gray armchairs. I arrived first and ordered a herbal tea. When Avery walked in, I recognized her immediately even though she wore a mask and a knit hat. She looked noticeably thinner, her eyes sunken, and her steps no longer as quick as before. We sat facing each other. No one rushed to speak. No one cried. "Thank you for coming," she said first, her voice so soft I had to lean forward to hear clearly. I nodded. "I'm not here to make peace. I'm here because I think you deserve to hear the truth." Avery bit her lip lightly, gripping the strap of her bag on her lap. "I don't know who I am anymore. When I'm no longer the good girl, the perfect little sister, I feel empty." I didn't reply immediately. I looked at her for a long moment, then asked, "Have you ever felt empty all those years? When I did everything right, studied hard, yet was called difficult, ungrateful, a troublemaker?" "I know I was wrong," Avery whispered. "I know. Stepping on others to be praised is wrong. I just haven't learned another way to survive." I leaned back, still holding her gaze. "You are not less than me. You never were. But you chose the easiest path to feel superior by putting others down. Not once, but again and again. And you didn't feel guilty until someone dared to speak up." She lowered her head, her shoulders trembling slightly. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to know. I'm trying to change. I'm in therapy. I stopped posting on social media. I'm starting over, not for Mom, not for any image." I was silent for a long while. In my heart was no resentment, but neither was there pity. Not because I was cold, but because I'd come far enough to understand. Forgiveness isn't opening the door for someone else to come in. It's unlocking the chains from within yourself. I stood up. "I won't turn back. But I hold no grudge. Keep walking your path and never choose to step on someone else to feel taller." Avery looked up, lips pressed, eyes glistening. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't ask for more time. She just nodded slowly, like someone hearing a verdict with no defense. I left the cafe and stepped into the late afternoon Paris light. The Seine shimmered in the distance, the faint sound of bicycle wheels rolling over cobblestones. I walked on, feeling neither light nor heavy. Just another step forward without looking back. One late autumn morning, I received an email from the United Nations Global Internship Program, notifying me that I had officially been selected as the Assistant Regional Coordinator in Geneva for a project supporting youth bound by family and cultural pressure. I sat silently by the window of my small Paris room, reading each line repeatedly, feeling every word like the final steps leading me out of a darkness that had shadowed my childhood. 3 weeks later, I left Paris on an early morning train to Switzerland. The train window opened to rolling green hills, misty lakes and golden-leafed forests curling with the wind. In my hands were a notebook, a small canvas bag, and an official invitation stamped with the United Nations seal. I carried little luggage. A new life didn't need the old things I'd once been forced to hold on to. At the Geneva Internship Center, I was assigned to mentor a group of international students from difficult backgrounds. Among them was Amira, a 19-year-old girl from Jordan, thin and with deep dark eyes that always seemed to be hiding something. Amira spoke little, but in our first private sharing, she bowed her head for a long time before quietly saying, "I'm not supposed to be here. My parents think I'm at a summer camp back home." Her voice trembled as she clenched her hands. "If they find out I applied to study journalism, I won't be allowed to return." Her story reflected a blurred mirror of my past, when every path was drawn for me, every free thought called rebellion. I didn't say much. I just placed my hand over hers and softly said, "Freedom isn't something you ask for. You have to fight for it." That evening, I messaged the lead coordinator to request an emergency meeting, asking for Amira's temporary protective custody under the program's emergency clause, ensuring she wouldn't be forced to return home while legally enrolled. I attached a letter explaining my own experience as evidence in both English and French. 2 days later, Amira was moved to a safe dormitory, her legalization process fast-tracked. She hugged me without words, but her eyes were different. Not fearful anymore, but grateful. Just a few days later, I was invited to attend an international press conference as an intern representing the Youth Policy Support Group for those in crisis. The conference room was on the top floor of a glass building by Lake Geneva, where the sky looked hand-painted blue and every small boat drifting below seemed like a newly begun dream of freedom. Reporters were present from everywhere, from the New York Times to El País, from Al Jazeera to NHK. I wore a simple light beige suit, pinned with a small leaf-shaped brooch, a gift from Lucia before I left Paris. I stepped onto the podium, ready to share my story from a perspective no longer hidden, no longer trembling. The event went smoothly. Reporters took turns asking about the work, policies, and approaches to reaching young communities. Everything was on point until a BBC reporter, a mature woman with sharp but warm eyes, stood up and asked, "If you could send one message home right now, what would it be?" The question seemed to hush the room. I felt dozens of eyes watching, not just because of the personal nature of the question, but because they had read so much about my story, from my speech at UNESCO to the countless media articles over the past months. I looked straight into the camera. My heart didn't race, nor did it tighten like it used to. It felt as if I had finally found the right place and time to say what I had held inside for so many years. I want to say, family isn't always about blood. Family is where you can be yourself, where you don't have to pretend to be loved. And if there is such a thing as the sweetest revenge, it's not making them regret. It's when they no longer have any power to stop you from flying away. The room went silent. No typing, no camera clicks. Just a quiet moment, as if all the noise of the world had been set aside to hear one truth clearly. True freedom is always something you have to fight for. No one gives it and no one has the right to take it back. After a while, applause broke out, slow but powerful. I didn't bow or turn away. I stood still, as if I had just closed an old door and was opening another, wider, brighter, and impossible to block. And if you're listening to me tell this story, maybe inside you carry something too. A story no one believed, a pain never named, or a dream not yet dared to be spoken. I don't know where you are on your journey. Maybe you're still trapped between walls that seem like love but tighten you with expectations, control, and silence. I don't have all the answers. But I know that freedom, the real freedom to be yourself, doesn't come from someone handing you a key. It comes from the moment you dare to step out on your own from the door that once held you captive. What do you think about my story? About family, love, forgiveness, or the limits sometimes set by those closest to us but called care? I genuinely want to hear your thoughts, because I believe every shared voice can be a bridge for someone out there still searching. If this story touched something inside you, please leave a comment. And if you want to continue walking with me through real stories of life, family, loss, and rebirth, hit subscribe so you won't miss the journeys ahead.